Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a really disturbing case out of East Kalimantan, where an entire family was murdered in their own home. We're going to look at the shocking motive, the crime itself, and the incredibly complex aftermath that has just gripped and horrified a whole nation. So it all starts in the early hours of February 5th. We're in a small, quiet village in North Panajam Pass Regency. A local community leader gets this frantic call, rushes to a house, and walks into an absolutely unimaginable scene. 5 members of one family, all brutally killed. But here's the detail that makes this whole thing so chilling. The very first person to report the crime, the guy who showed up acting like a panicked witness, he was actually the killer. So the big question is, how did his entire story fall apart so fast? All right, let's get into it. We're going to start with the crime scene itself, then take a hard look at the perpetrator. We'll unpack his motives, piece together the attack, and see exactly how his cover-up failed. And finally, we'll explore the justice, or lack thereof, and all the social fallout. You can just imagine what the police saw when they arrived. A father, a mother, and their 3 kids, all found dead in different parts of the house. The way the scene looked, the first thought everyone had was that this was a robbery that had gone horribly, horribly wrong. Now, let's talk about the person at the very center of this tragedy. The so-called witness, who later confessed to being the killer, was a 17-year-old high school student. His name was Junaidi, and he lived right next door to the victims. See, on the surface, Junaidi seemed like just another teenager. He went to a vocational high school, he had his friends, but that public persona, it was hiding something much, much darker. We're talking frequent heavy drinking, a serious obsession with a violent anime, and this deep, festering resentment towards his neighbors, which was all fueled by this infatuation he had. This wasn't some sudden snap. This was a hidden life of just simmering anger. And the victims, they were just a completely ordinary family. Waluyo and Sri Handayani, their 15-year-old daughter, Rizna, and their 2 little kids. Neighbors said they were quiet, problem-free people who were just living their lives, only 10 meters away from the person who would eventually kill them. That proximity, it's really at the heart of this whole tragedy. So you have to ask, right? How did Junaidi's anger build up to this point? Well, his confession laid it all out. It wasn't just one thing. It was this toxic mix of rejection, jealousy, and a whole bunch of what seemed like small, petty frustrations that he just let boil over. His path to murder really started with rejection. Rizna's parents didn't approve of him because of his reputation for drinking. Then you add in these little neighborhood disputes, arguments over his chickens, a helmet that wasn't returned. His anger just got worse when he found out Rizna had a new boyfriend. But the final trigger? You're not going to believe this. His phone broke. It cut him off from his anime and left him feeling completely powerless. That was the last straw.
Okay, so let's walk through the horrifying events of that night. And remember, all of this comes directly from Junaidi's own confession after his story completely collapsed.
Fueled by alcohol and pure rage, he grabbed a machete from his family's house. The first thing he did was cut the power to his neighbor's home, plunging it into total darkness. Then he got inside. He methodically attacked every single family member. And to make it look like a robbery, he stole a little bit of cash and 3 cell phones. After the attack was over, he committed horrific acts of sexual assault against the bodies of the mother and daughter before trying to meticulously cover his tracks. The second he was done, his whole focus shifted to creating a fake story. He immediately started trying to position himself not as the killer, but as a witness, maybe even a hero. He woke up his brother and they ran to the village leader's house with this totally wild, dramatic story. He claimed he'd heard screams, confronted a gang of 10 robbers, and barely escaped with his life after trying to stop them. It was a really bold lie, designed to throw any and all suspicion off of him. But experienced investigators, they saw red flags from the get-go. His story was just too theatrical, it was full of holes, and the way he was acting, it just didn't line up with someone who'd been through a trauma like that. The police pretty quickly went from seeing him as a witness to seeing him as their #1 suspect. And this is exactly where his entire story just crumbled. He claimed a whole gang attacked, but there was 0 evidence of multiple people. He said he fought them, but he didn't have a single scratch on him. While he's telling the story, his breath reeked of alcohol, and his account kept changing every time they asked him a question. But the final damning piece of evidence, they found his blood-soaked clothes hidden and soaking in his own bathroom. At that point, the game was up.
So he confessed. The investigation part of the story was over, but the fallout for the community, for his family, and for Junaidi himself was really just beginning. The consequences were unbelievably swift and brutal. As soon as Junaidi confessed, the local community, just overcome with rage and fear, took matters into their own hands. They completely demolished his family's home and their business. His family, even though they were innocent, had to agree to leave the village forever. And inside prison, reports started coming out that other inmates had already delivered their own form of justice on him. And this brings us to the real legal mess at the center of this. For a premeditated mass murder, an adult would be facing life in prison, maybe even the death penalty. But at 17, Junaidi is legally a minor, and that means the maximum sentence he could get might only be 10 years. That possibility has sparked this huge, fierce national debate about how to handle juveniles who commit these kinds of heinous crimes. So this case really forces us to ask some tough questions. On the one hand, you have the formal legal system struggling with how to sentence a minor for a crime this horrific. But on the other hand, you've got the community and other prisoners delivering their own swift, brutal consequences. It really makes you wonder about the true nature of justice and where that line between legal punishment and raw retribution should be drawn.